news, and right now we get into our big stories. We are looking at the pensions manifestos. So Social Security has recently become a major policy debate in most political jurisdictions. We can talk about the US presidential elections, the Germany federal elections for 2025, France, and many others. Ghana is not excluded. And the issues around pensions have often led to rising tensions between labor and government. So with the current happenings concerning the Social Security policy debate, we are taking a comprehensive look at the pension policy manifestos of the two major political parties, the NPP and the NDC, which is no doubt crucial to the voting decisions of Ghanaians working and retirees. Benjamin Akakpo is standing by with some facts and figures to usher us into the conversation. Ben, what do we have?
Well, quite a number of things to look at. I'll look at them briefly, contemplate them briefly, and then we'll get into the studio and have the conversation proper. So let's get to the slides now. We're contemplating the NDC and the MPP's proposed manifesto policy provisions on Social Security. Mind you, we've had a conversation on pensions generally. Today, we want to situate it in the context of the two major political parties. So let's do a little juxtaposition. If you look at the MPP, there's been that promise to build a nation that cares for and invests in the vulnerable. How? They elaborate. One, expanding and working towards a unified social protection benefit scheme, protecting the elderly and ensuring sustainable, secure pensions, and working with Parliament to pass an aging act. Like I mentioned, I'm just going to be picking bits and pieces because we'll elaborate on them in the conversation. If you look at the NDC on this point, it says it promises to enhance the security and sustainability of Ghana's pension scheme and ensure a dignified retirement for all citizens and also enable the pensions industry to deliver on its core mandate. So how they're planning to do that, legislative and regulatory frameworks to allow contributing workers who lose their jobs suddenly to also be supported. You know that in other jurisdictions, there are some support mechanisms for some people who lose work in the US and parts of Europe, the UK, among others. So that is the plan as far as the NDC is concerned. But if you go further, let's go to the next slide. You would see that the NPP also promises that it will work with regulators and labor, and there have been many industrial actions, strikes in recent times, from CTAG to UTAG to organized labor on different fronts, right? To work with regulators and labor to enable workers, including teachers, nurses, among others, to utilize pensions as collateral to secure mortgages or mortgage facilities. That's an interesting point, and when we get into the studio, we'll be looking at that as well. And also enact necessary legislation as far as enabling retirees to purchase or sell annuities. We'll have the experts explain the details to us. But when it comes to the NDC, as far as this same setup is concerned, we're putting them side by side. The NDC says it will set up a mortgage assistance fund to allow workers who have made Tier 2 contributions, not Tier 1, Tier 2 contributions for a minimum period of 15 years to use their contributions as collateral to access mortgage loans. So similar thoughts running across both the MPP and the NDC. And also accommodate past credit lump sum payments to workers from age 50 years. So once you hit 50, then that will be triggered, and improve efficiency in service delivery and enhance the efficiency of SNIT. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going through them very quickly because, like I mentioned, we'll expand, elaborate on those when we get into the studio. Now, they also, when it comes to the MPP, following from the mortgage point, National Cocoa Farmers Pension Scheme. So this is targeted at cocoa farmers, and undertake a mop-up exercise to enroll cocoa farmers missed in the enrollment exercise. What does the NDC say? Restructure and strengthen the corporate governance of SNIT for efficient pension fund management and enhance operations as well ahead of retirement. Let's go to the next slide. For the MPP, then it talks about SMEs, MSMEs, in fact, micro, small, and medium enterprises, using 10% of their annual tax payments as contributions towards retirement. 10%. If you come to the NDC, it says reduce old age poverty. And it goes back to the previous point that the MPP had. Reduce old age poverty by encouraging Ghanaians of all income brackets to invest towards their retirement by making defined pensions contributions. You do realize that a lot of those in the informal sector oftentimes are those most affected because they don't have a system like people in the white-collar jobs would have to pay, you know, a SNIT. And that is why a lot of the time you see some of them in the situations they find themselves. When it comes to the MPP, undertake a legislative reform. And there's a lot of focus on legislative reform as well. It's something we'll have to keep our eyes on. In terms of the law, what must change? Undertake a legislative reform to strengthen the security and intelligence agencies. And the MPP administration amended the act. They actually undertook that by submitting a bill to include the Ghana Police Service, among others. And Cap 30 comes into the fray. This is something we have to talk about vis-a-vis even the single spine salary structure, among others. But for the NDC, they talk about creating value for contributors and pensioners by investing pension contributions in development projects with high returns. And recently, if you remember the tussle between Rock City and Labour, you would know where that ended. And finally, on this point, implement the Muniyo initiative, Muniyo, to promote the uptake of special pension schemes for informal sector workers, such as commercial drivers and more. You'd realize that the MPP also spoke about the Ghana Police Service and others in there. They are also talking about commercial drivers, commercial motorcyclists, small-scale miners, among others. So if you look at it, this is what the two parties are looking at. And then you also see ensure the efficient distribution of contributors' funds to listed pension firms for optimal benefits. These are what the two political parties are offering. The question is, assessing these, how are we to look at what they are offering? And what does it mean for us, the ordinary Kofis and Amas out here? Well, we get into the details now. I'm handing over back to Sweetie Abochi to take on the conversation.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. So that is where we are right now. And joining us in the studio for a detailed conversation, analysis of where we stand in terms of Ghana's pension system and the promises that both political parties, the major political parties, are making is Dr. Mashood. Doc, many thanks for joining us this morning in the studio.
Thank you. Good morning to your viewers, and it's always a pleasure to have you here. But just a little correction. I'm not a dog.
Prof.
Yes,
Professor Mashood.
Mashood.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Right. Benjamin, it's good for you to join us, our special guest, after giving us those details on what the NDC and NPP want to do for us. But I know, want
right? But let me just, what did you say the correction was?
Prof.
Oh, it's just Mashood. I'm not a dog. I'm not a prof.
Just Mashood.
Okay, right. I just wanted that to be very clear.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sweetie.
Yes, so I wanted to say, can you first, let's start by explaining really what Ghana's current state in terms of pension system means and its main challenges that we have before we get to the promises that both major political parties are making.
Great. Once again, thank you very much for having me. As you may recall, Social Security Administration took center stage in the media, and the issue has become very popular and has increased public attention on the subject, and more or less has become a campaign-winning issue as far as Social Security in Ghana is concerned. Social Security has got the main objectives of improving benefit adequacy, paying benefits to more, and improving the long-term sustainability of pension systems. Basically, this is what is happening. And when you look at pension reforms around the world, you realize that the International Labour Organization, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the International Social Security Association, all these bodies have been talking about pension reforms in these areas. In fact, benefit adequacy, pension coverage, and financial sustainability are the cornerstones of Social Security. So basically, what we are going to do would be to situate the policies that the political parties have proposed within this context. See how they are really fitting and whether they represent the real solutions and hope for the Ghanaian pensioner. But it's important, of course, they are proposing solutions, and we need to understand what the problems are and whether the proposals that they have put forward will be able to address the same. Now, Suti talked about the Ghanaian context. What is happening is that I'm going to break the Ghanaian problem down into these three thematic areas. I'm talking about benefit adequacy, pension coverage, and financial sustainability. First of all, benefit adequacy. If you take the poverty threshold, national poverty threshold, and you synchronize this one with the pension payroll, you realize that as of 2022, we had very high incidence of poverty among the pensioner population. Here we are talking about 60% of pensioners are poor. And I'm talking about 6 out of 10 or 3 out of 5 pensioners are poor. Here in Ghana, as at December 2022. Now, a recent survey that the ACR conducted indicated that, or revealed that 85% of Ghanaian workers rely solely on Social Security payout.
85%?
85% of Ghanaian workers rely on Social Security payouts as their main source of livelihood. And so, if you put these two together, you realize that benefit adequacy is not that much. So now let's bring in, what do they call it, pension indexation, especially minimum pension. Minimum pension is seen as a relief mechanism for poor pensioners or low-earning pensioners. The minimum pension has increased from the year 2000 consistently every year. It has increased every year from the year 2000 until in 2017. From 2017, it has not increased. Then it increased a little bit in 2018. Then from 2019, the minimum pension has remained at 300 Ghana cedis for 6 successive years. And this is very problematic because if you scan through pension reforms around the world, you realize that almost all countries, especially in the OECD region, are undertaking pension reforms objectively to improve benefit adequacy to the poor or low-earning pensioners. Okay. And I'm not really finding that here in Ghana. So these are the issues. Now, that is the first part about pension adequacy or benefit adequacy. Now, let's come to coverage.
On the bit about benefit adequacy, though, let's look at it from 2000, like you mentioned. The increments have been consistent, pretty consistent. But if you look at the adjustments that have been made vis-a-vis the cost of living, yes, purchasing power parity, among others, have the increments been enough? It's one thing to increase, it's another thing to ensure that the increments actually positively impact beneficiaries.
So here we are talking about two issues. We are talking about pension indexation and minimum pension. Minimum pension is, even though it's part of the indexation mechanism, but it's a bit different. I like to separate it for the sake of context. Generally, there has been a mismatch. I mean, at least if I take the last 15 years, I can confirm that there has been a mismatch between price increases and pension increment 14 times out of the last 15 years. So 14 times out of the last 15 years.
There has not been a proper match.
No, there has been. In fact, what do they call it? Price increases have always surpassed, pension increments, and that is affecting the economic well-being of the Ghanaian retiree. And when you bring in the real effects of other, real inflation, the real effects of inflation, you realize that, the picture becomes even worse. And this one is pushing a lot of pensioners into poverty. So now I talked about pension coverage. About 82% of Ghanaian workers, according to estimates from the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations, 85% of Ghanaian workers are not covered under the pension system. As at last year, the Ministry for Employment and Labor Relations estimated that Ghana had 9.9 million workers, out of which 8.1 were not covered under the Social Security system. This is problematic. And
so 9.9 million workers, 8.1 million
are not covered under the Social Security system. And most of the uncovered workers could be found in the informal sector, mostly includes women who are concentrated in the markets. And this particular element is reflecting in what we call beneficiary coverage ratio. Beneficiary coverage ratio is looking at the proportion of Ghanaians who are aged 60 years and above who are not receiving pension from the pension system, or who are receiving pension from the pension system. Now, when you look at Ghana, we have less than 15% of persons aged 60 years and above who are formally or who are receiving benefit from the pension system.
Right.
This one does not match favorable against 27% in Africa and 78% worldwide. That is a key.
So that's 27%
in Africa. Then 78% worldwide.
And Ghana is?
Ghana is less than 15%. It's actually 14.2.
Wow.
14.2. This is a major poverty measurement indicator that needs to be looked at. I've seen some interesting proposals with regards to how to extend social security coverage to the informal sector. As I indicated, most of these people could be found in the informal sector, and it's a key poverty measurement indicator, something that we need to deal with. Now, when we come to financial sustainability, it is not new that the financing situation of the social security system is doubtful. Recent actuarial valuation reports have been very, very clear. They are telling us that the social security system is not financially sustainable in the long run, and the reserves are set for depletion by 2036. I've heard the Social Security Administration try to let us understand that, or try to make us believe that we should just close our eyes and have blind faith in Social Security, telling us that, after all, they are just projections and nothing is going to happen and all that. I think we have to situate the discussion about financial sustainability in context. I'm not going to look at the projections. Let's look at, what do they call it, the financial statement of SNIT in the last 9 years, which constitute 3 actual valuation reports. I just want us to look. These are real figures. It's not any projection. The first valuation, I'm talking about the last 3 years. The first valuation is looking at January 2012 to December 2014. The second valuation is looking at January 2015 to December 2017. The third valuation, which is what we are dealing with currently, is looking at January 2018 to December 2020. Now, when you look at generally, we are talking about schemes reserves being depleted. Generally, the scheme reserves or the position of the reserves is determined by excess contribution over expenditure in any given year. So, in other words, what is coming into the kitty is a lot more than what it is expending to beneficiaries. Exactly. So that then you can have more to invest and then gain more money. Build the reserves. Right. So if you look at the first valuation, 2012 to 2014, the excess contribution at the end of the period, the excess contribution over expenditure was 4 billion. Okay. Now you go to the second valuation, the excess contribution over expenditure came down to 2.4 billion. What happened in between? It means, revenue is not matching up with expenditure. That is basically what it means. Because if there's a drop by about half, exactly, it means something is wrong somewhere. Exactly. So 4.4 billion in the first valuation, it declined to 2.4 billion in the second valuation. In the last valuation, the excess contribution over expenditure is standing at 0.76 billion. So it has fallen to about 760 million. Exactly, exactly. But do you know why these changes are happening? Because then it means we're slowly getting close to zero. Exactly, and that is why they will warn you that your reserves are depleting. That is why that report came through telling us that by 2025, so these are the 2040 rather. 2040, no, by 2036. And in fact, the scheme would be forced to reduce benefits by 24% by 2040. Based on the current actual valuation. It's an aspect that we have not been looking at. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we need to look at the figures, the real figures. I'm not looking at any projection. I'm just looking at the income statement of the scheme in the last 9 years, which constitute 3 valuation reports. 4 billion excess contribution over expenditure reduced to 2.4, then it reduced to 0.76 billion. Clearly, if I'm the head of the Social Security Administration, the alarm bells should go off, especially if I have the income security of the Ghanaian worker in mind. But that's exactly where it also becomes a question of whether these institutions abroad really have the correct picture. Because you've heard the head of SNIT say that that is not the case. In fact, in recent times, they were talking about some billions of Ghana cedis they had doled out to beneficiaries and all of that. Is that the reality? Are we tickling ourselves and laughing? Or is it that those outfits outside are getting something wrong? Basically, what they want us to believe is, what they are telling us is that you should just close your eyes and have blind faith in Social Security, despite all the science available to us. It's not done anywhere in the world. You see, the interpretation that we are given, and the explanation that we are providing about the actual valuation report, when you go anywhere in the world, unless of course we are talking about a different planet, Pluto altogether. But as long as we are talking about the Earth, we are talking about Social Security on Earth, Those are the basis. You are looking at how demography and economy is affecting the income, the expenditure,
factors.
the expenditure and the income equation, and you have to look at that. And that is what I've just looked at. If you look at the revenue expenditure equation, you get to realize that, look, I just need to go to work. And let me add this one. If you take the first valuation, 2012 to 2014, the share of expenditure or the share of income that was used for expenditure was 37%. In the second valuation, it increased to 65%. And as we speak, in the last valuation, the share of the income that was used for expenditure, and when I say expenditure, I'm talking about administrative cost and cost of benefit, it had risen to 79%.
Sweetie Aboji, 2036 is about 12 years away.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you'll be in Ghana still working. You know, there are people who also work abroad and for a while they don't contribute here, or they may still want to continue contributing. But if we are going to do this thing, some of us are wondering at age what? By 2036, where will we be?
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is you're saying that they're expecting us to close our eyes and expect the dominoes to just fall. So what should we be doing instead? No. You also talked about some reforms that are already underway.
That is why this one is very important. In fact, I was expecting a very big statement. We'll go into the details shortly. I'm sure when we go in there, in fact, I was expecting a very big statement from both political parties, especially concerning this one. It's a real issue. It's not as if somebody is a naysayer. No. That is why I had to forget about the projection that I alone made and now come to the income expenditure statement of the trust in the last 9 years. Unless, of course, you have other figures to contradict what I'm telling you. But we have to go to work.
Should we get into it? The various policies and strategies that both political parties are getting. Benjamin, from listening to you, it looks like the NPP's focus is on broadening the pension base, you know, to include informal sector legislation and all that. So, should I say Mr.?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, Mr. Mashood, what is this feasible? What they are proposing? Does it have what it takes to meet us at the point of our needs in terms of pension benefits? With these alarming figures, 8.1 million people who are not covered.
Yeah, so just as I said...
and that's for the NPP.
Exactly. Yeah. Assessment, we both have actually, you know, proposed solution in regards to, you know, extending coverage to the informal sector. May we go back to the slides? The NPP is saying that it is going to encourage informal sector, pension into the informal sector.
So let me help you before we get it projected. The MPP says it promises to build a nation that cares for and invests in the vulnerable by expanding and working towards a unified social protection benefit scheme. Okay. Unified social protection. Okay,
so I think I'll prefer we look at them this way.
Would you like us to look at one party and be done and go to the next, or you want us to look at them side by side?
No, so we can look at them side by side. I think it will be interesting. There are common,
denominators.
Exactly. So we'll look at them that way. So if they say expanding, the NPP says expanding and working towards a unified social protection benefit. It's not very clear. Maybe the NPP is talking about Section 213 of Act 766. The Section 213 stipulated that 5 years after the implementation of Act 766, all para schemes must be put under one umbrella of Social Security. That is Act 766. Now, I think we are doing 16 years after the implementation of the Act 766. We haven't seen anything. But it is the MPRA that is mandated, to implement this particular section of the law. I remember in 2018, the MPRA submitted a memo to Cabinet for approval so they can implement this particular section of the law. Then in 2021, eventually they received the approval. Since then, we haven't had anything. Then we rather continue to have disaggregation and splitting of the pension system. This one's breaking away. This one is breaking away. As long as...
What was the communication there? You said since 2021 you have...
There hasn't been any communication. You know, you only find political actors saying that they go and promise. For instance, the NPP said somewhere that they want to encourage the security services by moving them to Cap 30. So if you look at this particular point where they are saying that I want to build a unified social protection benefit scheme, which requires that you have to put everything under one umbrella. Now you again turn around to say that I want to encourage these people by putting them under Cap 30. That is a sharp contradiction.
What does this unification entail? What does it mean? Does it mean unification in terms of all people in the country, or does it, what exactly?
Various sectors, various classes of workers will all have to be brought under Act 766. You know, for instance, the police service, the military, all, including workers in audit service, all those under Cap 30 is non-contributory.
Right.
Their benefits are being financed from the taxpayers, from the pool of taxes that we pay. But when you come to the other side, Act 766, that one is contributory. They deduct money from your salary.
Right.
And benefits are financed using your own contribution.
And that's where the dichotomy is.
Exactly.
Contributors versus Cap 30.
Exactly.
So what does this unification then mean?
The unification, it was under Act 766, 2 and 3 of the Act 766 indicated that, look, after 5 years after implementation of the Act 766, we are bringing everybody under Act 766. The police service, all the security services were supposed to be brought.
But that hasn't happened.
That hasn't happened. And that is creating a lot of inequity, discrimination, and all that. So it is very, very, very important we implement Section 213 of Act 766. And I'm happy the NPP has mentioned that, except there's a contradiction somewhere where they are talking about putting all the security services by encouraging them, or, I mean, whatever, by, you know, putting them under Cap 30. It's not very clear that way.
Then when you look at what the NDC proposes, on the other hand, promising to enhance the security and sustainability of Ghana's pension system and ensuring a dignified retirement for all citizens, how do you match that up? But wait, even before you go there, so you're saying that once the MPP talks about this unification and then they make mention of Cap 30, it means there's a disjointed situation.
Exactly, that is a contradiction. If you say you are expanding and creating a unified pension scheme, what it means is that you have to implement Section 213 of the Act 766, which states that 5 years after the implementation of the Act, all parallel schemes must be brought under one umbrella. That is the position. Even though we haven't had it, there have been attempts. We have had you know, political actors saying a lot about you know, the implementation of Section 213 of the Act. We haven't actually seen anything. So the point that I'm making over here is that saying you are, you know, putting all security services under Cap 30 and saying you are building a unified pension scheme is a clear contradiction. And let's come to the other side, where the NDC is saying that it's going to promises to enhance security and sustainability of Ghana's pension system and ensure a dignified retirement for all citizens and blah, 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 blah. So now, what happens is that I don't know what they mean by, what do they call it? Excuse me, let me.
Okay, so there you go.
I don't clearly see what they mean by an efficient pension system, but what I know is that an efficient pension system is one that pays adequate benefits to as many people as possible, non-discriminatory, with low administrative costs as possible, with strong engagement for, you know, social partners.
You said low what? Low what?
Low administrative cost, strong engagement for social partners. Public confidence is very, very important to the success of any pension system. And for public confidence to exist, there must be proper, or you know, good governance is very, very, very essential over here. So if they mention, they have lumped everything together, and there's a need for us to break them down. Enhance security and sustainability. I'm excited about this one because they have mentioned sustainability. Because what it means is that they have recognized the situation that we are finding ourselves, financing, you know, situations. Ghana's pension system, and to enable pension deliver on its core mandate of providing whatever. So now let's go to A. Allow contributing workers who lose their jobs suddenly due to natural disasters to be supported while they search for opportunities. Now, I think COVID-19 came with a lot of lessons. You know, it imposed a lot of hardship on almost all economies. A lot of, increment in prices of goods and services, increment in cost of living, soaring unemployment rates, and all that. And if you look at what other countries did in response to what actually happened during the period of COVID, what they did was to, tweak their pension systems in order to pay more benefits to those who were impacted by the pension system. So if the NDC is saying that it is going to, pay benefits to those who are affected by disasters, I think that is a very good call. And I think... but
is it sustainable? I mean, recently we have the VRA, the spillage, the dam spillage, and everything that happened. Some of those people are still calling for some support. I know farmers who lost banana farms and everything. People were affected. Those are force majeure situations, if you like, though the spillage had to be done and it was man-made. But are those some of the things we should be looking at? Other jurisdictions have food stamps and other things that they use. How do we go about it to ensure sustainability?
Yeah, I think this is a very good one. It is sustainable. Let's look at the qualifying conditions. They are saying that you have lost your job. That is the first condition. And the second condition is that should happen through a disaster. If you put the two together, you realize that the likelihood of it happening is very low, or the likelihood of the social security system paying benefit to said people is very low. But broadly, where it does happen, the impact will be very, very, very huge. So I see that as a very good policy, especially during times of disasters.
Okay. Sweetie, can we get into some others?
Yes, so that's for expansion of coverage and benefits adequacy. In terms of funding sustainability, and you touched on it a bit, I tried to do, in preparing for this, a side-by-side, what each party is promising and the similarities in there. So let me just refer this to you. So in terms of funding sustainability, the NPP, NDC says they aim to increase government contributions to pensions, potentially revising the percentage of government revenue allocated to SNIT. And the NPP says they are proposing reforms within SNIT to ensure long-term sustainability, including improved investment strategies and operational efficiencies. Which one of these, in terms of funding sustainability?
Yeah, so
as are the points of
in that case, I'll be going for the NDC's proposal, and I tell you why.
Which is to increase government contributions to pensions.
Exactly. So because I'm not sure are they talking about contribution rate?
That will be.
I am sure that is what they are talking about. This is just a direct response to the actual valuation report. The actual valuation report did indicate to us that the scheme is not sustainable, and there are a few options open to you. But one recommendation that they put forward was that there is a need for contribution rate increment, and that is where we are. So if the NPP is
like it or not, you can look at building your investment portfolio, like the hotels and other things. You can do all of that, but some way somehow we must ramp up in the sums of money going to SNIT, and one of those options is to have government
the contribution rate. Yeah, that is exactly what they are saying. So if you look at what the NPP is saying, it is saying it wants to improve the long-term sustainability of the scheme by ensuring that investments are prudently done and all that. That is where we have been all these years, and it hasn't really worked for us. So I would want to make my judgment based on what the actual valuation report is saying. The actual valuation report has given us the problem, and it has recommended a solution. And so what the NDC is saying is clearly in line with the...
How, though, do you think government can address this? Because we don't have a large kitty that we can just dig into. It's the same tax, pool. We are all contributing. When it comes to taxes too, they will tell you, we are not even doing enough and it's difficult to meet government responsibilities. Then you have to pay public sector workers and all of that. how are we going to do it vis-a-vis an IMF-supported program, vis-a-vis tax problems and all that? How will we do it?
Yeah, so let me explain this one a bit. If they say they are increasing contribution rate to SNIT, what it means is that currently the contribution rate at the end of the month, Joy takes 5.5% from your salary at 13%, making 18.5%. 13.5% of the collected 18.5% is going to SNIT.
Right.
Out of the 13.5% that is remitted to SNIT, SNIT would then take 2.5% and give it to NHIA.
Right.
Leaving effectively, what it means is that SNIT is managing just 11%.
Right.
So what the actual valuation report is telling you is that the expenditure is rising so much due to demography and economy, administrative costs and all that. So there is the need for you to increase the contribution rate. So that is basically what the actual valuation.
So this will not have to come directly from government?
Exactly. No. It is coming through employer-employee contribution. Okay. And if you look around Africa and the world, I would say, Ghanaian employees pays the lowest as far as contribution rate is concerned.
So it must go higher?
Yeah, it has to.
What would you say averagely? I mean, let's look at, you are the expert. Yeah. Let's look at maybe our sub-region and maybe go to the southern or northern belts of Africa. What prevails there? How much higher can we go?
So it depends on who you are looking at. The benefits are financed through employers' contribution and employees' contribution. If you look, I think I've rated 47 countries in Africa, and I think Ghanaian workers, I'm talking about the contribution that is coming from the employee. They pay one of the lowest. They pay one of the lowest, actually. I think out of 47, they came, 45th.
45th?
45th. But when it comes to the employer contribution, the component that the employer is paying, which is 13%, I think they were about 10 in Africa, as far as...
Okay, so the problem is not how much employers are paying, as far as the scheme is concerned. It's about the contribution of the employer himself or herself.
Of the employee. So if...
the employee, yes.
If you ask me...
The employee,
if there are going to be pension reforms, and we all agree that, look, let's engage and, improve the contribution rate to the pension system in Ghana. The first place I'll be looking at will be the employee contribution, which is 5.5%.
Right.
That is the first place I'll be looking at.
All of us sitting here, what we contribute by law, the 18-point-something that goes in there, our 5.5%, then the employer's 13-point-something%, out of which the 13%, that's the total. Then the 2-point-something% will be taken for national health insurance.
Living 11%.
You are left with 11-point-something%.
No, 11% actually.
11%.
11%.
So it means that if we agreed to ramp it up a bit by, let's say, another 5%, then we could, I don't know what percentages you'd be looking at, but the question also is looking at the economy.
Do we want to do that?
And how much you are getting coming back to you. Would you want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. So we have to look at it more broadly. That is why engagement is very, very important. If you listen to almost all those who are talking about sustainability of pension, engagement is very, very important. And that is why I indicated that you have to, first of all, run the pension system efficiently. Gain public confidence. Public confidence is key to the long-term sustainability of the system. And for confidence to exist, good governance is important. So if we have issues like somebody is trying to sell a hotel somewhere, they say, Senate is spending a lot in this area and all that, it is affecting public confidence. And once public confidence is affected, it gets to the point where you need to engage the people and let them understand that, look, we are all in trouble. There is a need for us to increase the contribution rate. It has been there for many, many, many years. We have gotten to a point that if we have to sustain the scheme for future generations, we need to increase the contribution rate. If it gets to that point, and you want to go back to them, they'll be looking at how efficiently you are running the pension system.
Let's stay on public perception a bit. We've been seeing the newsletters, the statements from SNIT themselves, refuting some of the claims and all that. How exactly can they revamp their image in terms of public perception? Now, I'm sure many young people are not confident enough in SSNIT, and that's why they don't even bother to contribute. They prefer other private insurance companies and the rest. What should we be doing to revamp the image in terms of public perception of SSNIT?
Yes, so I think that there's so much we can do. I've indicated that SSNIT is very, 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 very important. All that is for all of us. It is very, very important we do all that we can to protect the scheme for all of us. So if you find somebody doing something somewhere and you think it is not in line with what the best practices require, what the person is doing is going to affect the scheme, that means we have to draw the person's attention. I keep saying that it is not out of place. It is not wrong for an actual valuation to say that, look, your scheme is facing financing challenges. It's not sustainable in the medium to long run. As a result, your reserves are set for depletion at a certain point. It is very, very normal for us to have a report like that. If you go to the US pension system is not sustainable, and they said the reserves are set for depletion by 2035. Whereas here in Ghana, we have 2036, they have 2035. But the difference between Ghana and the US is that, and other places, is that they are discussing the solution.
Okay.
Here, we are not doing anything.
And on the other hand, they have systems that cushion the citizenry, like when COVID struck.
Exactly.
Like when the economy was impacted, even job creation and those without jobs. They have systems that cushion.
Exactly. They did a lot. And that is why Social Security is a major subject in the build-up to their 2024 election. It's a major, and it's an election decider.
Do you think we are not paying enough attention to this ahead of election 2024?
No, so that is why we are having this conversation. It is very, very important. Look, when you go back from 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020 manifestos, you look at the Social Security provisions that are stated in the vaguely stated, they are not direct, they are not specific. It's very difficult for you to tell whether it has been implemented or not. But I have seen this time, especially the NDC, has moved away a little bit in terms of preciseness, in terms of directness. For instance, they have indicated somewhere, accommodate past credit lump sum payment to workers from age 50 years. This is a very good policy. And we have to do some numbers.
I've seen that. So when it comes to the mortgage bits, which I think we should get into right after this point, accommodate past credit lump sum payments to workers from age 50 years. So once, but then you would look at the first point says, set up a mortgage assistance fund to allow workers who have made tier 2 contributions for a minimum period of 15 years to use their contributions as collateral to access mortgage loans. Does it mean that regardless of when you started working, once you hit 50, I mean, what?
Yeah, so when the past credit is a lump sum that is managed by SSNIT, and it's for those who contributed into the scheme before January 2010. So anybody who contributed to SSNIT before January 2010 has some lump sum in there. So that is what the NDC is promising, that, look, once you hit age 50, we are making that payable. You can decide, to apply for the benefit and it will be paid to you.
Of course, at your own risk. If you take it.
No, that is a very good policy.
No, I'm saying that at your own risk in the sense that, of course, you can't eat your cake and have it. So if you go for a lump sum at that time, then it means some things will not be available to you later, right? No,
lump sum is under the 3-tier pension system. Your lump sum will be taken care of by the tier 2.
Okay.
But this is just a component of a lump sum that is managed by SSNIT when you retire. At this point, it is paid when you retire. And they are saying that, look, the distribution of the benefit on the timeline is so skewed towards the end of life. And I understand, when you take life expectancy in Ghana, which is currently standing at 65, then you look at worker mortality statistics, you realize that this is a very prudent one. It is going to improve the social and economic well-being of workers nearing retirement. And look, Ben, let's do some numbers over here. They are saying accommodate or pay past credit lump sum to workers who are age 50 years and above. This particular policy, if implemented, is going to affect more than 1 million workers across this country. And let's take the first 4 years. from 2025 up to 2025, over 650,000 workers are likely to benefit from this particular policy. So if this is implemented, what it means is that we are going to have 502,000 workers who will be qualifying from in 2025. You know, such lump sum will be paid to such people once you apply for the benefit. And as I said, two things: you must be 50 years and you must have contributed into the scheme before January 2010. And once that happens, you can walk to Senate and apply for your benefit, and the lump sum will be paid to you. If you look at, you know, the distribution, as I said, the distribution of, you know, benefit on the timeline, it is so skewed towards the end of life. So it is important that you are able to access some of the benefits at a certain point in time.
Sweetie, there's an interesting point that comes to mind, because as he talks about workers, there's what, about 10 million, 9 point something million in the working bracket. If you even look at our life expectancy, pegged at 65.17 years, then it means that, yes, it makes some sense to get your money early, because you don't even know whether you'll be hitting
and that is why
65 years.
I'm tying the life expectancy with the mortality statistics of workers. I'm not talking about pensioner mortality. I'm talking about a lot of workers die.
Yeah. I mean, if this is the general, then it means that workers also fall within that bracket.
Exactly. So here we are talking about workers, so we are not talking about pensioners.
Yeah.
The policy said that once you hit age 50, you can go and apply for that component of your benefit and receive it in the form of a lump sum.
I see.
Right.
That is what it is.
The slide is gone, but I wanted us to talk about cocoa farmers, because we're very specific over there, and then maybe we can look at the investments of the funds and all that. But let me find that here. So the NPP says the National Cocoa Farmers Pension Scheme Initiative, and they're going to undertake a mop-up exercise to enroll cocoa farmers missed in the ongoing enrollment exercise. I know cocoa is a big deal for us in this country, and we cannot leave out the cocoa farmers. Is this... for me, it's just a question of whatever they're promising, is it what we need? So is this what we need?
Yeah, so basically, any policy that is targeting the informal sector worker is very, very, very important. But what we need to look at is that if any initiative will fail if it is not backed by its own legislation. In fact, the International Social Security Association, the International Labour Organization, they have described widely described the informal sector worker as a difficult to cover group. So what they are saying is that if you want to really bring in the results, what you have to do would be to create their own legislation, and the legislation would have to take the special needs of the informal sector worker. Their needs are different from the formal sector workers.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So if you are building a legislation that is not looking at their own needs and their, you know, peculiar situation, definitely is going to fail. That is why, you know, the Senate seat program is not getting the traction that.
But this is specific, is it not?
Yeah. So let's look at the national.
It's very specific.
So that is why I'm saying that anything to do with the informal sector worker is a very good one. But particularly on this one, I think I have a few questions. Under which law is it operating? We don't know under which law the National Cocoa Farmers Pension Scheme is operating. We don't know who the administrator is, because certainly it's not SNIT. And yes, exactly. It's not SNIT. And the last time I heard, it was MPRA that was the administrator. We can't have a situation like that, because you can't have the
National Pensions
Regulatory Authority
itself.
Exactly. You can't have a situation like that where the regulator is the same administrator. So those are questions. What are the benefits and financing provisions? How many years do you have to contribute to qualify for a particular benefit? What are the benefits available under this particular scheme? What are the financing situations? At what rate are they contributing? There are a lot of questions we have to ask about the National Cocoa Farmers Pension Scheme. Is it contributory or non-contributory? What are the qualifying conditions for benefit? How is it financed? This particular one, all these questions that I'm asking are shrouded in secrecy, and it's not, transparency is completely lacking in this case. So
what can both of them, because they both talk about similar structures when it comes to cocoa farmers, what can they do to make this thought better? Because while we look at whose options are better. We want the national option, even if it means fusing their two ideas together.
Yeah.
We don't want an MPP plan and NDC plan. We want a Ghana plan.
Okay,
What
so,
can they do to better these?
Yeah, so we can take very good examples from Cote d'Ivoire in 2020. We can take a very good example from Egypt in 2020, Morocco in 2020, Nigeria in 2019, and Zambia in 2019. And these countries, I can go on and on, but one thing they did that informed the success that they are chalking as far as extending social security to the informal sector is that they built separate legislation that took into consideration the peculiar, what do they call it, circumstance of the informal sector worker. Now, they created separate legislations for them. And if you come
separate
to
legislation,
it doesn't come under Act 766. And I'm saying that when I talk about legislation, you are looking at the benefit provisions, how it's going to be financed. At what point can they take benefit? What are the qualifying conditions? You have to have a separate legislation for these people. And the NDC talked about the money year. So here, they are talking about, I don't know whether they have mentioned in there that it's going to be a separate legislation. I think that kind of gives us a national picture. That is giving us more of a national picture. The only thing that is missing in there, I'm not very sure whether they have mentioned they are going to create a separate legislation for this group. But if that is done, then I'm sure NDC should have a very good, what do they call it, plan. Let's come here, using 10% of the annual tax payments as contributions.
That's the MPP, right?
Yeah,
in terms of the MSMEs. Is that what you're talking about?
There are so many ways, you know, you can encourage or you can support informal sector, you know, workers. But certainly using tax as contributions or treating tax as contribution for, you know, social security financing, it's not only complicated, but it's going to violate the long-standing belief that social security benefits might be financed through well-defined and earmarked contributions.
What's the complication there?
So here you are talking about taking 10% of tax, your annual tax, and paying social security. It is very, very, very complicated. You are moving from one, you know, state institution to the other. Of course, there are provisions in the Act 760 that tells you that 5.5% of the employee benefit, of the employee salary should be deducted. The employer should add 13%. That is clear cut. Now, if you are now digging your hand somewhere, it could be very, 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 very complicated.
But it's still taxing, though, is it not? What they're taking right now from us as workers is tax. What they are adding to it...
It's not tax.
It's not, you don't call it tax?
We don't call it tax. It's only in certain jurisdictions that you find it, you find that they call it tax, but it's not actual tax.
Not actually tax.
The tax doesn't come back to you in any form, exactly. But at the end of the day, when we are talking about contribution is returned to you in the form of benefit.
For the sake of time, I want us to breeze through some of them. When there's talk about mortgages, you know, using this in the sense of mortgages, how feasible is that? And then let's also look at when the MPP talks about legislative reform. You've already spoken about having separate legislations for some things. Let's look at those two areas quickly.
Yeah, so the MPP has mentioned, you know, using tier 2 contributions to, you know, as a collateral to secure mortgage for primary residents. The NDC has also mentioned something like that. For me, that is no-brainer for both political parties. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer because it is clearly stated in Section 103(2) of the Act 766 that it's stipulated in the Act that the worker can use his tier 2 contributions as a collateral, you know, to secure mortgage for, you know, what do they call, primary residence. It's clearly in there, so what is left is just implementation. And I remember in 2016, the MPP did indicate that it was going to implement fully Section 103(2) of the Act 760, which is referring to that.
What has happened to that?
That has not happened. And I can tell you that as we speak, the National Pension Regulatory Authority has not developed the guidelines for the implementation of that particular section.
Which means, as of now, it is not implementable.
After 16 years of implementation of the Act 766.
Wow.
So all they need to do is to develop. So I think I would have been very, very okay if they said the next MPP or the next NDC administration is going to develop the policy guidelines for the implementation of Section 103(2) of the Act 766. That is detailed, direct, concise, and it's relatable. It's something you can relate to. But this is something that is supposed to be implemented. It has been there since 2010. We are here, and it has still not been implemented, and we keep repeating it in the manifestos. All we need to do is to go into action, develop the policy guidelines, and implement.
Well, the recent Afrobarometer report did not include SSNIT as one of the state institutions that have lost trust, but we know that SSNIT has come under a lot of controversy. But the intervention of organized labor, that sale of 60% stake in those 4 hotels would have been. So the question is, how can we as contributors, citizens, hold SSNIT accountable in terms of management or investment of these funds that are ours? That would be my final bit.
Yeah, you can only do that through your labor unions, through the labor union. And that is why they represent the workforce. So if you don't have a very effective labor union, then everybody will be in trouble. Everybody is going to be in trouble. If you go to other jurisdictions, most of the time, I keep saying that the labor unions, in terms of research, they go ahead the institutions themselves. So you would,
of course, they are protecting their interests.
Exactly. At the level of the worker, you have very little to do if you don't have a very strong labor union representing your interests.
It falls on labor union.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mashood. Ben?
Thank you.
Well, I mean, we've come to the conclusion of this discussion, and we're only hoping that, I'm sure a lot of them will be watching this morning and taking a cue from some of what we've shared, because in the end, we are not so bothered. Is it an NDC plan, NPP plan? Is it a positive plan? All we know is we want something that will better the Ghanaian employer in terms of, and you mentioned some of them, proper payment of adequate benefits, low administrative costs, stronger engagement with the different parties, and non-discrimination, among others. Hopefully, with time, we get that, sweetie.
Mr. Abdallah Mashood is the Executive Director for the Africa Center for Retirement Research, and he joins us to put in perspective the various promises from the 2 major political parties, NDC and NPP, in terms of pensions or contributions to Social Security. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's still a lot coming your way on the AM show. Don't go away. We'll be right back.